निवासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I want to address something Tom just said, which is, in fact, that woke is supposed to advance equity in Europe. So here's the definition of equity, and see if it sounds like a definition of anything else you've ever heard of. The definition of equity comes from the public administration literature. It was written by a man named George Frederickson. And the definition is an administered political economy in which shares are adjusted so that citizens are made equal. Does that sound like anything you've heard of before? Like socialism? They're going to...
Yeah, and see, this is what we had discussed in a previous live stream, that ये उनका इक्वलिटी करने के लिए सोशलिज्म चाहिए, इक्वलिटी करने के लिए कम्युनिज्म चाहिए, इक्वलिटी करने के लिए इक्विटी चाहिए, विच इज़ द इक्वलिटी ऑफ रिजल्ट्स, आउटकम्स, नॉट जस्ट इक्वलिटी ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी. ये सब हुआ है विद बिकॉज ऑफ दैट इल्यूजन, दैट स्नेक ऑयल दैट इज सोल्ड इन एब्राहमिक फेथ्स ऑफ इक्वालिटी. ओके, यू आर इक्वल इन द आइज ऑफ गॉड. जब बोलोगे तब ये सब भी जस्टिफाइड है. हाउ इज दिस डिफरेंट फ्रॉम व्हाट क्रिश्चियन एपिस्टम टीचर्स और इस्लामिक एपिस्टम टीचर्स? तो इकोनॉमिक इक्वलिटी करते फिरो, गरीब क्यों होगा? सब टेस्ला लेके घूमेंगे, यही होगा इक्वलिटी के चक्कर में. दैट्स वाई आई डोंट लाइक द आइडिया ऑफ इक्वलिटी इन द फर्स्ट प्लेस. देयर इज नो इक्वलिटी ऑफ बर्थ, हार्डवर्क, एफर्ट, कुछ चीज़ का इक्वलिटी नहीं है. इक्वलिटी ऑफ ब्रेन न्यूट्रिशन का इक्वलिटी नहीं है, इक्वलिटी ऑफ IQ नहीं है, इक्वलिटी ऑफ फिजिकल हेल्थ नहीं है, इक्वलिटी ऑफ वर्कआउट नहीं है. तो सिर्फ और सिर्फ आउटकम कैसे इक्वल हो जाएगा? तो इक्वलिटी इज अ बुलशिट टारगेट टू हैव एनीवे. All we can best do is that the least privileged are not so underprivileged that they want to burn the system down. Okay, they don't burn the hierarchy down. Hierarchy होगा, hierarchy अच्छा है, hierarchy में सब prosper होता है. Which is why I always make fun of that phrase called rising income inequality. I always say it sarcastically because it's a bullshit fear mongering term. Rising income inequality का मतलब क्या है? कल तक पूरे देश में सबका सैलरी था 10 रुपये, 20 रुपये, 30 रुपये. आज किसी का सैलरी है 150 रुपये, किसी का सैलरी है 80 रुपये. तो 80 और 200-250 में राइजिंग इनकम इनइक्वालिटी हो सकता है, मगर कोई भी आज 20-30 रुपये नहीं कमा रहा है. दैट्स स्टिल बेटर.
It's something you will certainly hear it is not, that it is different. And the professors and the philosophers will spend a large amount of time explaining to you why. No, it's about economics when it's Marxism. This is social, this is cultural, this is different. It's not different. I need you to think biologically for one moment, and I don't mean about your bodies. We could do that. That's a different topic. I want you to think how we organize plants and animals when we study them. They're species, but above species there are the genus of the animals. So you think like the cats, all the cats, but you have tigers, you have lions, you have house cats, you have whatever, leopards, many different kinds of cats. If we think of Marxism as a genus of ideological thought, then classical economic Marxism is a species, radical feminism is a species in this same genus, critical race theory is a species in this genus, queer theory is a species in this genus, post-colonial theory that's plaguing Europe is a species in this genus, and they have something that binds them together called intersectionality that makes them treated as if they are all...
And this is what I think I am proposing, but not many right-wingers in India, not many right-wingers in West are getting. Only some friends of Rajiv Malhotra have understood this. There is a point of alliance possible between the West and Indian right-wingers, Hindutwadis, because what they are facing today because of post-colonialism, now that they are suddenly waking up to the fact that अरे patriots कहाँ गए? हर फैमिली में भोसरी वाला बोल रहा है कि अमेरिका बहुत ख़राब है, हमने इम्पीरियलिज्म किया है, हमने रेसिज्म किया है, हमने स्लेवरी किया है. That's happening only in the last 1 or 2 generations, right? We have had that for 70 years. So we are victims of the same enemy, post-colonialism. और अमेरिकन राइट विंगर्स को अब लग रहा है कि that these post-colonialists are specifically against Western ideas. Baki, as if these post-colonial dumbfucks are defending Hinduism. They don't, and as a counter to that, Douglas Murray is writing books against casteism. Okay, this is what Abhijit Iyer Mitra said very rightly, that these new Western conservatives who are writing things against post-colonialism, okay, are basically rising up to things that have been espoused by Pakistanis in general, or Muslims, and some Marxist Hindus. But it's not what directly Hindus always said about them. Hindus are ready to be Christianized and Westernized. So they are directing their hate on Hindus of today, whereas the hate should be towards specifically post-colonialists. Whatever they are facing, disrespect for the country, disrespect for their religion, disrespect for their culture, disrespect for their flag, they are seeing it only in the last 10 years, 15 years. We have been seeing it for 80 years. So हमारा unity possible है because our enemy is same. And after all, we do believe in rule of law and others don't.
All one thing. But the logic is Marxist. And I want to convince you of that. Because Marx had a very simple proposition, but we get lost. We think that Marx was talking about economics because he often talked about economics. He wrote a book called Capital. It's a very famous book. And we think, well, this is about economic theory. But this isn't true. It's only true on the surface. If we go below the surface, what Marx was talking about was something different. We know what Marx's hypothesis was that we must seize the means of production if we were going to bring socialism to the nations, to the world. We have to seize the means of production. So we have to ask, what does he mean? And if we think that it's about capital, then we miss what he means. If you think it's about the means of production in the factory with a hammer, and the means of production in the field with a sickle, then you miss what it means. Because Marx explained what makes human beings special in his earlier writings. And what makes human beings special is that man is a being that is incomplete and knows that he is incomplete. He is a man whose true nature has been forgotten to him, which is social being. He is a socialist at heart who doesn't realize it. And the reason he doesn't realize it is because of the economic conditions operating as a means of construction or production, not just of the economy, but of him, but of man, of society, and particularly of history. Marx said that he had the first scientific study of history. How was history produced? By man, doing man's activity, and man's key activity was economic activity, as he saw it. And so economic production doesn't just produce the goods and services of the economy, it produces society itself. And society, in turn, produces man. He called this the inversion of praxis. And so when he says we must seize the means of production, and he's talking about factories and fields, he's actually talking about how we construct who we are as human beings so that we might complete ourselves, so that we might complete history. And at the end of history, mankind will remember that he is a social being, and we will have a socialist society, a perfect communism that transcends private property. That's how he put it. He said, in fact, that communism is the transcendence of private property as human self-estrangement. That's a quote from the Economic Philosophic Manuscripts, 1844.
Actually, this is a point where we must remember that any solution or any problem that has the word social at the left of it is probably a bullshit idea. Okay, everything cannot be designated as social. So most things which are called, it's a social problem, a ragging the social problem. Okay. Is not really a social problem, and therefore social justice, okay, social welfare, all of this is a pure horseshit. It can't be social. What they mean is societal. Maybe a lot of them mean it unconsciously societal, but they say it social because people who actually know the difference between societal and social, they have deliberately termed it social and not societal. Societal means पूरे society में हर जगह में ये problem in some magnitudes or the other does percolate. Okay, like casteism is societal. Okay, society में हर economic class में और या फिर हर जगह में थोड़ा बहुत casteism हो रहा था और हो रहा है, but it's not really a social problem. Maybe it's social as well, maybe, but not everything is social. Ragging is not social. It's not even a societal problem. When anything is classified as social, it means that you are trying to shift the blame on someone else. If a solution is social, that means even if it does not affect me, even if it does not affect me remotely, now we have to give extra taxes for that goddamn problem. So always if anything is claimed to be social, always think about it, check it out whether it's really social or it's just societal.
So Marx was interested in controlling or understanding and controlling how man produces himself. And he writes about this exclusively in the 1840s. Very deeply. How do we do this? And he looks at the economic conditions and he says, this is where it is. And that's why we get economic Marxism, and that's why we think Marx was an economist. But Marx was never an economist. He was a theologian. He wanted to produce a religion for mankind that would supersede all of the religions of mankind and bring him back to his true social nature.
Yes, 100%. And this is why anyone who is opposing, any politician, any ground level worker who is opposing Marxism, leftist thinking anywhere, which is BJP basically in Bengal, because they think Marxism is only done by CPM, because most of their followers also believe in free shit. So they have to counter it just the way a religion has to be countered. Unless, otherwise it's going to be a big problem. There are specific ways to counter specific things, right? There are best practices for every war. So the way you counter a political party is not the way you counter a religion. Okay, that needs to be understood. The way you counter a political party is you say that this party is corrupt, pani nahi aa raha hai, raste kharab hai. That's not how you counter a religion. You have to counter a religion by coming up with your counter religion or by saying that your religion is better. वही करना होगा बंगाल में. Marxism is a religion. Leftist politics is a religion. Trinamool is Marxist. Communists are Marxist. Congressis are Marxist. Punjabis are Marxist. Everyone is Marxist. And they have to counter on the basis of this religion that they have ingrained, and their Kula Devta being Karl Marx and their Kula Devi being Judith Butler. Let's check a comment. Much of Marx's observations were accurate, but his solutions for those issues were bad. There's a debate to be had whether his observations were correct in the first place, because his premises are faulty most of the times.
And this is the true fact of Marx. And what the goal was, like I said, is to complete man. So what he said is, well, how are we building man currently? All of his economic analysis is about how are we building man at present through what he called material determinism. And he said, well, what we have is a special form of private property in our society. Our society is organized around private property. And so all of our thoughts organize around private property. In other words, there's a special kind of property that the bourgeois elite class has access to, and then they organize society to exclude everybody else from access to that property through exploitation, through alienation, through estrangement, through oppression. And so what Karl Marx was proposing is that economics becomes a vehicle to separate society into a bourgeois class that has access to a special form of property. The people who have access wish to retain that, so they oppress people and keep other people out of that special form of property. They erect a system of classism to do that. It's enforced by an ideology called capitalism that believes that this is the right way to engage in the world. And what we have to do is awaken the underclass, the proletariat, to the real conditions and the fact that they are historical agents of change, and bring them to do a revolution and transform society so that we would have equity or socialism, whichever word you want. They have the same definition. Now let's say that we step out. We step back from this species, this economic species, Homo economicus, and we step back to the genus, and we look at this idea, a special form of property that segregates society into people who have, the bourgeois, and the people who do not have, who are in class conflict with an ideology that keeps this in place. And the underclass must awaken with consciousness to fight back and to seize the means of production of that form of deterministic property. And now we say, change out class, put in race, and watch, we get critical race theory falls out of the hat.
Yeah, this is where cultural Marxism comes into play. Socialism is also uniquely collectivist, like a religion, yes. That is why there is hardly difference in opinion within leftists, similar to Abrahamics. There is no difference of opinion, but there is difference of agreeing to who is really a socialist. Because they are always looking for their heretics, okay. You are not leftist enough. That thing always goes on. Or you are a sellout, yeah. So, but when they do have difference in opinion, they absolutely despise those who think differently, yes. And so Marxism breaks into different sects like Islam, Christianity did before. Yes. How was the property made? Did it emerge out of nothing? Was there some hard work, merit in accumulating the property? No, there was not. It was all because of privilege. Which is why I'm saying a lot of Marx's premises are faulty to begin with. Therefore, his diagnosis of the problem is also pretty flimsy. And this is why I've heard this argument in so many contexts, from so many people, right? That it's all because of privilege. So now my counter argument to those people is that, okay then, follow their parents only. Anyone you appreciate in front of a Marxist, they will say that, privilege हो गया. तो उसके बाप के तरह बनो, उसके बाप के बारे में विकिपीडिया में पढ़ लो, उसके माँ बाप ने क्या क्या किया था, फिर वो फॉलो करो. Don't be inspired by the son or the daughter then. Okay. You think it all happened because of the parents. Go do what their parents did. Do it for your children. Let's see what happens.
Just like that. Very simple. In 1993, Cheryl Harris wrote a long article for the Harvard Law Review called Whiteness is Property. She explained that whiteness, or white privilege, constitutes a kind of cultural private property. She says it must be abolished in order to have racial justice. Just like Karl Marx said that in the Communist Manifesto, he wrote, communism can be summarized in a single sentence, the abolition of private property. Well, this is why critical race theory calls to abolish whiteness, because whiteness is a form of private property. People who have access to this property are whites or white adjacent, or they act.
You know who white adjacent is, right? Vivek fucking Ramaswamy is white adjacent. Okay. Here to Learn is asking an important question. Why stupid ideologies spread so far and wide? There are two reasons. One is because, again, people thought this is just another way to counter British colonialism. Because British colonialism जो कि लाया गया था to counter Muslims and वो गया नहीं, वो खुद oppressive बन गया. अब उसके वजह से जो problems create हुए, उसमें से एक solution, one of the three solutions was leftism, okay, communism, socialism, etc. The other option being Hindutva nationalism and then Nazism as well. But the other reason is that, see, Marxism is in general a call to action for all people who operate on the basis of sympathy, not rational thinking, logical thinking, a holistic way to approach to any information. Okay, it's all about sympathy, and it's all about, and not even empathy, it's purely sympathy. And why do some people approach something on the basis of 100% just sympathy? First of all, women do that because it's their motherly instinct to do that, because of their hormone called estrogen, which men don't have. Men have less of it and women have more of it, and women have less of testosterone and women have more of estrogen. And we have more testosterone and then less estrogen. It's not that we don't have any of the other, okay. But it's the woman's motherly thinking to think that any situation, anywhere a person is suffering, it's possible to help them out in any magical fashion, and they must have had something bad done to them, so let's just help them out. So it's the very feminine way of looking at the world, and feminine ways of looking at the world has become more and more popular ever since the comfort world has set in and physical might is not that big of a concern. But why did so many men take it up? Because they were planning to do violence with it anyway, because I will be sympathetic, tum kaise rokoge? But other than that, people do have a sympathy because of another reason, which might be the reason why men as well, a lot of men and some women also joined communism and identified with communism because of this outlook towards sympathy, which is also known as the soft bigotry of low expectations. Okay, some people are so superior that they don't even discriminate against the lower person. Okay, Brahmins who are saying that tu shudra hai, tu raste se hat, is actively saying that yes, I know you are so low that you are unclean and so get out of my way. But what the left is telling poor people is that I am inherently, consciously or subconsciously, I know that I am so superior that I don't even expect you to improve. Therefore take some money. Tumse nahi ho paega. Tumse na ho paega. That's the idea. That is the soft bigotry of low expectations. That also causes and leads people to have a worldview based only on sympathy. And basically Abrahamism is based only on sympathy. कि मुझे पता है तुम अंधकार में हो, ठीक है, तुम्हें नहीं पता है, मैं लाऊंगा तुम्हें रोशनी में, इस्लाम की रोशनी में हो या क्रिश्चियनिटी के पियर्सिंग वेल ऑफ क्रिश्चियनिटी, दैट्स ऑल द सेम. You are in darkness and I have to save you from darkness because I have so much sympathy for you. Okay, and that is an offshoot of that. Abrahamic sympathy based thinking is Marxism. That is why Marxism and leftist politics in general has to be countered in a way that you would counter a religion, not just a political ideology or a political party. तो ये सिंपैथी का चक्कर है. सिंपैथी जहाँ पे है कुछ, और बहुत से लोगों का ये सिग्नल थ्योरी भी होता है कि मैं एक्चुअली हैप्पी हूँ कि नहीं हूँ, ये वो गया भाड़ में, मुझे इंस्टाग्राम में दिखाना है कि मैं हैप्पी हूँ, ठीक है. इसे सिग्नल थ्योरी कहते हैं. और इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हम बात कर सकते हैं वर्च्यू सिग्नलिंग का, कि वर्च्यू है कि नहीं पता नहीं, मगर मैं वर्च्यू सिग्नलिंग करके ब्लैक लाइव्स मैटर का डीपी डाल दूंगा, ठीक है. तो ये भी एसोसिएटेड है वो सिंपैथी कॉन्टेक्स्ट के साथ, क्योंकि ये इजी है, ये आसान है करना, ठीक है. ब्लैक्स का क्यों हाल खराब है, बोल दो वाइट लोगों की वजह से. वाइट लोगों का देश है, मगर वाइट लोगों का एवरेज ईयरली इनकम है $65,000 और वाइट एडजेसेंट इंडियंस का इनकम है $1 लाख पर ईयर. तो क्या होगा, बंदूक गलत जगह पे रखोगे, you'll never introspect what exactly is going wrong. Why are Shudras and Pasmandas mostly poor today? Why? Because of Brahmins. That's the lazy way of thinking, and that's the sympathetic way of thinking, and that's the soft bigotry of low expectations way of thinking, and that's the Abrahamic sympathy way of thinking के no, you don't know you are oppressed, I know you are oppressed, now come with me, आओ रोशनी में. So there are so many reasons basically why this gets popular, because it's easy to do, it's sympathetic. तुम sympathy दिखा दो, हो गया काम. Victimhood. Virtue signaling takes less time and brain cells. Yes.
White. These are words out of the American lexicon that they've used to describe how people gain access to the private property. People without that are people of color, and they are oppressed by systemic racism. Systemic racism is enforced by an ideology of white supremacy instead of capitalism. If you think of whiteness as a form of cultural capital, white supremacy, as they define it, is identical to capitalism. It's the belief, it's not believing that white people are superior. It's believing that white people have access to the control of society and should maintain that, even if you don't actually believe that. If you merely support that, you have adopted the ideology of white supremacy into your mind. And so you have the exact same system. And the goal is to awaken a racial consciousness in people so that they will band together as a class and seize the means of cultural production so that white cultural production is no longer the dominant mode. It's a big mystery in Europe, I know, in the UK, throughout Europe, I hear this question again and again. Why on earth is this very American phenomenon about slavery and so on that doesn't apply to our country? Why is it popular here? It's because it's not about history at all. It's not about slavery at all. Those are excuses that they use. It's about creating a class consciousness that's against this form of property called whiteness, that's against the dominant culture that may just be a matter of fact, say, if you're in Europe. That's why. Because it becomes a site by which people can come together and they can channel resentment and try to claim power. I wrote a book called Race Marxism, and I define...
This is the similarity of Marxism with religion. So this is where it's their religious get-together spot. This is where they come to a holy spot and chant and pray.
Find critical race theory as it really is. In that book on the first page, I said that critical race theory is calling everything you want to control racist until you control it. But couldn't we say the same about Marxism? It's calling everything you want to control bourgeois until you control it. But those mean the same thing. They mean exactly the same thing. But what about, say, queer theory?
This is kind of वो circular reasoning बोलते हैं जिसको, which was said by Nietzsche, and he was kind of wrong to say that, as said by Sir Roger Scruton, that Nietzsche had said that there can be no absolute truth, and that statement is flawed, because okay, then if there can be no absolute truth, can the statement that there can be no absolute truth is true at all? Then even that statement is not true. Okay. Yes, the whole workers' rights movement is based on this emotional manipulation. Yes, I am telling you. Just ये किसान नेताओं को, देश में जो जितने बड़े बड़े किसान नेता हैं और लेबर यूनियन के नेता हैं, इन सबको 5 साल के लिए सिर्फ हाउस अरेस्ट में रखो, कोई अत्याचार मत करो, हाउस अरेस्ट में रखो, पिज्ज़ा बर्गर खिलाओ, और देखो 5 साल में क्या क्या हो जाता है इंडियन फार्मर्स का और लेबरर्स का. You all know this, right? Musk is hated for not allowing unions in the Tesla factory, but his workers get paid on an average more than any Ford or GM worker. You all know this, right? And even I came to know this when Biden came to power, and he did this big gathering or seminars of sorts, a meetup between the president and people who are making वो EV, electric vehicles, okay? और उस मीटिंग में इलॉन मस्क को नहीं बुलाया जो बाइडन ने, ठीक है, जो कि पूरा हड़ता करता है, हु इज एट द फोर फ्रंट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स, उसको अमेरिका के प्रेसिडेंट ने नहीं बुलाया. क्यों? क्योंकि दोज यूनियंस विच आर फंक्शनल इन फोर्ड एंड GM, they are biggest donors of Democratic Party. Okay, and when even Elon Musk has been pushed about it, and you all know, anyone who has read any economics or has read Thomas Sowell will know exactly how this works. When let's say I'm a guy who allows unions to function, and people in my company get together and negotiate with me, the CEO, that they'll get a salary of 10 rupees. Okay, मगर उसमें से उसको हाथ में मिलता है 7 रुपये 6 रुपये, क्योंकि 2-3 रुपये तो पूरा ये जो यूनियन मशीनरी है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, वो मेंटेन करने में चला जाएगा. यूनियन के मेंबर्स कौन होंगे, यूनियन का हेड कौन होगा, बात में प्रोटेस्ट कौन करेगा, प्रोटेस्ट का ऑफिस कहाँ होगा, प्रोटेस्ट में होर्डिंग, बैनर, फेस्टून्स कहाँ से आएगा, उसका प्रिंटिंग का खर्चा कहाँ से आएगा. ये जो मशीनरी है प्रोटेस्ट का, वो आता है वो जो $10 नेगोशिएट कर लिया, क्या बात है, उसमें से आता है. ठीक है, तो वर्कर 7 रुपये लेके घर जाता है, और यूनियन वालों को तो लेबर नहीं बनना है, यूनियन का खुद का बिग लीगल फीस भी है, यहाँ वहाँ लोगों को सू करते फिरेंगे. और इंडिया में तो उनका गुंडा बदमाश भी रखना पड़ेगा। तो ये सब का सब सैलरी यूनियन नेगोशिएटेड सैलरी से आएगा। मगर मस्क बोल रहा है कि तुमको हम नहीं देंगे 10 रुपये, तुम 8 रुपये रखो, ठीक है। तो ऑन एन एवरेज मोस्ट पीपल गो अराउंड विथ 8 rupees 9 rupees salary in Tesla, but whereas other people who have officially negotiated 10 rupees salary go home with 7 rupees because they have to basically give zakat to the union, and that's why Marxism again is a religion. However, don't you think if workers employees do not fight for their rights, they can be exploited by owners? I am not supporting unions because can be certain, but there can be certain regulations. Very good question, and there I have a answer to this. See, the first and foremost basic principle of free market, or anyone who will counter you is with that basic principle, is that if a worker is really not getting what he wants to, what he thinks he should be paid, if his skill is that much in demand, he has the option to go into another company, right? But the problem arises if companies are really let's say have an understanding in between them that we will keep wages suppressed. Okay, हम 15 रुपये से ऊपर सैलरी नहीं देंगे किसी को, मगर तुम्हें लगता है कि तुम्हारा 18 रुपये 20 रुपया सैलरी होना चाहिए, तो तुम जाओगे कहाँ पे? जहाँ भी जाओगे तुमको 15 रुपये में ही काम करना पड़ेगा। मगर ये काम करना एक्चुअली इलीगल है, और ये एनफोर्स करना कि कंपनीज अपने आप में ये कल्यूजन ना कर पाए, जिसको कार्टेलाइजेशन बोलते हैं, ये कार्टेलाइजेशन इलीगल है, और ये कार्टेलाइजेशन ना हो ये देखने का काम गवर्नमेंट का है। Which is why the Chanakyan state is a strong state which functions and does what it is supposed to do and lets other people do what they are supposed to do. मगर हमारा बैंडेड क्या कहता है कि नहीं हमको सैलरी कम मिल जाएगा, इसलिए बेंचोद यूनियन वालों को बिठा के सैलरी खिलाओ। That's the problem. See, and you can apply this free market principle even on our political parties. That's what has happened up till 2019-20 basically, 2019-2020. See, the free market principle can apply to this idea to the political scenario, because so many political parties we have, so we have basically so many parties to choose from. They can have an internal competition amongst themselves that okay, you are not doing the best job for me, you do the best job for me, okay. But that's a problem which can't happen in USA because there are only 2 parties. But यहाँ पे वो सॉल्व नहीं हुआ उसके वजह से, वो कंपटीशन की वजह से। यहाँ पे क्या हो गया? कार्टेलाइजेशन हुआ, okay. Cartelization becomes a problem and monopoly also becomes a problem, which happens in West Bengal basically because SVF is such a big producer that you can't go anywhere else. SVF owns the cinema theaters, SVF distributes everyone's films. So if you go to any other producer to do music for them, your movie won't even release. So you have to work for SVF directly or indirectly. So that's another way of controlling the market, but which is also illegal basically and should be broken up. बट एनीवे, कार्टेलाइजेशन तो इंडियन पॉलिटिक्स में बाकी सब पार्टियों के बीच में हुआ है हमेशा। सबके सब चुतिए सोशलिस्ट है ना, सबके सब अगेंस्ट कास्टिज्म है, हिंदू कास्टिज्म ओनली, सबके सबको यूनियंस करना है, इवन आरएसएस सबका यूनियन है, सबको फ्री चीजें देना है। तो ये तो कार्टेलाइजेशन हो गया। तुम लोगों के बीच में कोई पोलराइजेशन है ही नहीं। मुझे चाहिए पोलराइजेशन। आई वांट टू सी हाउ डिफरेंट यू आर फ्रॉम द अदर पार्टी एंड ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ सम पीपल विल वोट फॉर यू एंड सम पीपल वोंट वोट फॉर यू। मगर अगर ये पूरा जो यूपी बिहार का जो ये 100-150 पार्टी है, तृणमूल है, कांग्रेस है, इन सब का पॉलिसी सेम है, that's cartelization. You are not getting a better facility because all of them have agreed upon. And the bigger problem of cartelization that we have seen in Indian politics is that no one pursues any case against each other, because everyone knows that I will let you steal this money because you will let me steal some money, which is why now everyone is fucking pissed off their minds that BJP is pursuing the ED thing, right? ED has been given so much power. That is the thing that's pissing off everyone, because they thought this will go on. They thought Modi will also say that, या तुम थोड़ा पैसा मार लो, बाद में हम भी पैसा मारेंगे। अब नरेंद्र मोदी को पैसा नहीं मारना है, योगी आदित्यनाथ को नहीं पैसा मारना है, but obviously the counter argument can be that why is he pursuing only non-BJP people? Because I guess he has some commitment to winning elections and he needs some machinery, and at best this is coming as a warning to BJP people as well, that mend your houses by the time I'm coming to you. I'm getting to you. First I'm getting to all the other parties. I'm coming soon for you as well. But you stop doing this by the time I come for you. That's the message that's clear to everyone. But everyone else thought that BJP will never do this. And that's what has happened. Why did Mamata Banerjee leave Congress in the first place? Because that cartelization was happening in Bengal. CPM and Congress were two absolute homies, brothers. They were sucking each other's dicks all day. That's why Mamata Banerjee got pissed off that अरे भाई opposition क्या कर रहा है यहाँ पे? Trinamool is beating up our people on the streets and you are supporting Congress in everything. Even in colleges. कांग्रेस का जो स्टूडेंट यूनियन स्टूडेंट विंग है छात्र परिषद और एसएफआई हर जगह में इनका अंडरस्टैंडिंग रहता था. हमारे बंगाल में आई डोंट नो इफ इट हैपेंस इन मेनी अदर गवर्नमेंट कॉलेजेस इन द रेस्ट ऑफ द कंट्री एज वेल. सेम कॉलेज हैज अ डे वर्जन, अ नाइट वर्जन एंड मॉर्निंग वर्जन, राइट? फॉर एग्जाम्पल आशुतोष कॉलेज में ये एसएफआई कांग्रेस ने अपने आप में अंडरस्टैंडिंग बना लिया. कोई भी किसी और को इलेक्शन लड़ने नहीं देगा, मगर आशुतोष कॉलेज का जो नाइट वर्जन है, नाइट कॉलेज है, उसका प्रिंसिपल मशीनरी पीपल सब अलग है मगर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेम है. तो उसका नाम है श्यामा प्रसाद कॉलेज. तो श्यामा प्रसाद कॉलेज में हमेशा सीपी पावर में रहेगा यूनियन में. आशुतोष कॉलेज में हमेशा एसएफआई पावर में रहेगा. और उनका मॉर्निंग है जोगमाया देवी कॉलेज. जोगमाया वॉज सर आशुतोष मुखर्जीज वाइफ, श्यामा प्रसाद मुखर्जीज मदर. Jogomaya college was morning. That is a girls college, and there only DSO was always in power. So that's cartelization. That cartelization needs to be prevented by government. वो cartelization prevent करना government का काम है. Not doing unions and asking for bullshit salaries. There are monopolies and monopsonies. Yes. And yes, SVF is kind of a monopoly and monopsony. They are the sole buyers of services provided by technicians as well. This cartelization also happens for hiring maids in building complexes. Yes, anyone paying higher than they deserve amount, higher than the decided amount, faces isolation from neighbors. That's why where there is high union bazi, anyone who works and gives and produces more than the decided amount, they also get looked upon by the rest of their employees. That's also very common. तुम भाई इतना काम क्यों कर रहे हो? तुम्हारे अगेंस्ट एचआर इन्वेस्टिगेशन शुरू हो जाएगा, यूनियन करवाएगा इन्वेस्टिगेशन. इतना काम करने को तुमको किसने बोला? हमने नेगोशिएट किया है 10 रुपये, तुमको मिलेगा 7 रुपये और तुम काम करोगे आधा घंटा ही. 45 मिनट अगर काम करने का तुम्हारा चाह है, पैशन है, मारो गोली पैशन का. हार्डवर्क को माँ का भोसड़ा. तुमको इतना कम ही काम करना है, इतना ही सैलरी देना है और तुमका इस सैलरी का पोर्शन मुझको देना ही देना है. दैट्स व्हाई यूनियन इज नेवर अ सॉल्यूशन.
How is that Marxist? It's very strange, all this gender and sex and sexuality. Well, Tom said, what does woke attack? The idea of being normal. Well, the queer theory thinks that there are certain people who get to set the norms of society. They are privileged. They call themselves normal. They say this is normal. It's normal to consider yourself a man and look like a man and act like a man and dress like a man and eat meat like a man. And then there are women that should be feminine and pretty and all these things. And so they get to define what's normal. They're heterosexuals, so they get to define the heterosexuality as normal and other sexualities are abnormal. And so you have a conflict across this cultural property of who gets to be considered normal and who is a pervert or a freak or some other term that gets used in their literature. But technically, who is a queer, which sounds like a slur, but they adopted it and it's a technical academic term now. It means an identity without an essence, by the way. An identity that is strictly oppositional to the concept of the normal, as defined by queer theorist David Halperin in his 1995 book, Saint Foucault, Toward a Gay Hagiography. I didn't make that up. I'm not extrapolating. So you see, queer theory is just another species of the genus of Marxism. What about post-colonial theory, which is plaguing Europe, thanks to Frantz Fanon and his biggest European fan, Jean-Paul Sartre? What about this? What's the same? You have the West as the oppressor. They have access to the material and cultural wealth of the world because they've decided their culture is the default and have gone and colonized the world to bring culture to the world, as they say. And so the oppressed, the natives around the world, the people have to band together, and their activity is going to be called decolonization.
And decolonization किसके एडुकेशन पे, किसके लिटरेचर पे होगा? मार्क्स का. तो पोस्ट कॉलोनाइजेशन कहाँ सोल्यूशन दिया है हमको? पोस्ट कॉलोनाइजेशन जो ये सब लोग बोल रहे हैं कि पोस्ट कॉलोनाइजेशन इज़ वेरी प्रो नेटिव एट्सेट्रा. अरे वो प्रो नेटिव वहाँ पे है जहाँ पे एंशियंट कल्चर उसका रह नहीं गया. जहाँ पे एंशियंट कल्चर रहा है, जिंदा है, वहाँ तो बोल रहे हैं कि वो फैशिज्म हो गया. So they are absolutely wrong on their diagnosis. They're half correct in their diagnosis of post-colonialism. This is what I've noticed in Douglas Murray as well.
They have to remove every aspect of Western culture. So when they come to Belgium or they come to France or they come to the United States and they say we're going to decolonize the curriculum, or they go to the UK and say we're going to decolonize Shakespeare, this is what they mean. We're going to remove the cultural significance of your cultural artifacts because those cultural artifacts themselves are oppressive to us. This is the same system. It's another species in the exact same genus, and that genus is Marxism, which is a way of thinking about the world. And the goal is always to seize the means of control of the production of man and history and society Marx merely believed it was through economic means. Now it's through socio-cultural means. The evolution into this sometimes called Western Marxism began in the 1920s. We had a Russian Revolution in 1917, and this did not happen in Europe. And the Marxists in Europe were confused. And so Antonio Gramsci sat down and wrote out some things, and George Lukács sat down and wrote History and Class Consciousness after the failure of the revolution in Hungary. And they wrote what became cultural Marxism. The idea that we have to enter the cultural institutions in order to change them from within, because Western culture has something about it that's repelling socialism. So we have to go inside and change the culture to make it socialist. Now, you aren't allowed to talk about cultural Marxism now. They've categorized this as a conspiracy theory. They say that it is anti-Semitic. This is not true. Antonio Gramsci wrote books. George Lukács wrote books. You can read those books. They have a philosophy. If they don't like the name cultural Marxism, we can use the name that other people at the time used, Western Marxism. So much like, a virus adapting to the conditions, it changed to try to infect a new host. It worked in feudal societies. Marxism took over in Russia. It took over later in China. It took over in all of these kind of agriculturally driven feudal societies, but it wouldn't work in actual capitalist nations because Marx was wrong. Then several Germans from the Frankfurt School started to study this phenomenon in more depth, and they evolved the idea further. They evolved the idea into what's called critical Marxism. They developed what's called the critical theory. And Max Horkheimer, who designed the critical theory, explained the critical theory. And what did he say? He said, well, what we came to realize was that Marx was wrong about one thing. Capitalism does not immiserate the worker. It allows him to build a better life. So I developed the critical theory because it is not possible to articulate the vision of a good society on the terms of the existing society. So critical Marxism criticizes the entirety of the existing society. Everything is somehow needing to be subjected to Marxist conflict analysis. But how?
अरे अभी इसको कौन समझाएगा कि एग्जैक्टली यही हो रहा है इंडियंस के साथ 1947 से 50s से राजा राममोहन रॉय के टाइम से ये लोग आज फेस कर रहे हैं. दिस इज एग्जैक्टली व्हाट वी हैव फेस्ड एंड दिस इज व्हाई वी हैव अ कॉमन natural क्या था natural allies. They should become our natural allies against this common enemy called post-colonialism and Marxism.
How is that to be done? They sought an answer through the middle part of the 20th century, and World War II breaks out. The Frankfurt School comes to America, which in this metaphor is the Wuhan Institute of Virology, because gain of function began to happen on the Marxist virus very quickly in America. And American universities adopted these professors from Germany. And Herbert Marcuse, writing in the 1960s, said extremely clearly, this writing in 1969, not only did he say capitalism delivers the goods, gives people a good life, makes them wealthy and comfortable and happy, he also said that the working class is no longer going to be the base of the revolution because of these things. In other words, we don't have to be responsible to the working class anymore, which opens up the ability for Marxists who are seeking power to make friends with the corporations.
Yes, and I have heard this argument when I was in class 12, when I used to visit JU in awe of the people there. And my political science professor, political science teacher in school was an MPhil guy in JU. He used to have these discussions with other people that the lower class, the real proletariats are sort of not a problem per se, but they are not as important in this fight against capitalism and bourgeoisie because they can't give arguments. They don't have the power of articulation. They don't know how to fight the battle intellectually. They can be used as pawns in an actual armed revolution. But armed revolution agar is out of option, तब क्या करे? तब मारो गोली सालों को. तब क्या होगा? जाने दो. तब हमको ही सब दायित्व लेना है. तब हमको ही ये एजुकेशन सिस्टम के अंदर रह के ये सब चुतियापा फैलाना है. सो द वर्कर्स आर नॉट इवन अ बिग क्वेश्चन if armed revolution goes out of question. That's what has to be done in the Patharba situation as well. Pasmandas, the poor Muslims who are their pawns in violent conflicts, if people like Yogi Adityanath and Himanta Biswa Sharma, if these people make it go into their heads that violence is out of the question. तुम जो बोलना है बोलो, गुस्सा दिखाओ, सब चलेगा. मोदी को गाली दो, सब चलेगा. रास्ते में वायलेंस करोगे, सीधा घर टूट जाएगा. ये अगर एक और 5-10 साल में दिमाग में घुस जाएगा और सब कुछ करूँगा, रास्ते पे पत्थर नहीं फेंकूंगा, then they will have to do other things. Then Pasmandas will go out of their priority list because now they are not important to them. Because now they can't use them to just throw stones. Now they'll have to fight it other ways. और ये fight with other ways they have already started in the West. not in the east, in India so much. You realize why? क्योंकि वहाँ पे पत्थरबाजी नहीं चलेगा, सब कोई AR-15 निकालेगा, ठीक है. इसलिए वहाँ पे बेंचोदों को इक्वालिटी लैब्स खोलना पड़ता है. वहाँ पे जाके बोलेंगे सबको कि देखो भाई कितना इस्लामोफोबिया है, क्या करें अब. वहाँ पे पत्थरबाजी नहीं होगा ना, बिकॉज वायलेंस इज आउट ऑफ द क्वेश्चन देयर. यहाँ पे वायलेंस आउट ऑफ द क्वेश्चन it has to become that obvious that it's out of the question, and then they will start doing the equality labs things here, which they are doing anyway. Here they are doing patharbazi as well as equality labs things. So we have to counter them in both ways. And as I've always said, you want to counter patharbazi with Bajrang Dal, fair enough. Go have 100 FIRs in your name. But it's the job of Yogi Adityanath and the police anyway, for which we pay taxes already. And force them to do a better job, and not just create another system where you have to pay another bunch of your salary to those people, to Bajrang Dal, etc. But ideologically counter करने के लिए हमको संजय दीक्षित जैसा दीपक संजीव सन्याल चाहिए, and the discussions we are having, those things are required. Okay, let me check some comments. This is where objective scientific method should be used to decide what is normal. This is where the concept of no objective truth is dangerous. And see, what I clipped in that short recently, that objective truth नहीं है ambiguous है, ये सब तो philosophy के realm में है, policy के realm में तो कभी नहीं है. अर्थशास्त्र, do you think there is no objective truth in अर्थशास्त्र? वेद पढ़ के, वेद पूरा खा लेके, बार बार जिन लोगों ने न्याय या जस्टिस, लॉ कुछ भी बनाया है, उन सब के दिमाग में लॉ को लेके तो एम्बिग्यूटी नहीं था. ये चीज़ करना अलाउड है, ये चीज़ करना अलाउड नहीं है. यहाँ पे तो एम्बिग्यूटी नहीं है. इट्स ऑल बेस्ड ऑन वेदास ओनली. तो ये जो फैलाया गया है कि देयर इज नो एब्सोल्यूट ट्रूथ इन हिंदुइज्म, सो अलाउ एवरीथिंग दैट्स हैपनिंग. नो. देयर आर एब्सोल्यूट लॉज, देयर आर एब्सोल्यूट डूज एंड डोंट्स बेस्ड ऑन लॉ. तुम फिलोसॉफी और हार्ड लॉज मत मिक्सअप करो, स्वधर्म और राजधर्म मत मिक्सअप करो, और फिलोसॉफी और पॉलिसी भी मत मिक्सअप करो. इफ द प्रोलेटारिएट्स आर पर्सनल, वेट, यहाँ पे एक हार्ट साइन आ गया है जिसकी वजह से मुझे कमेंट नहीं दिख रहा है. लेट मी चेक इट फ्रॉम हियर. If the proletariats are persona non grata, then why are they even fighting capitalism? I thought all this was fighting for the working class proletariats. Where are proletariats really fighting? इंडिया पे हो रहा है, इंडिया में हो रहा है क्योंकि उनका तो रिलीजियन बन गया है. Proletariats are always religious. This is what you have to understand. The very reason that Marxism did not become a worldwide phenomenon, which they predicted would happen, which is their signal that workers of the world unite because you have nothing to lose but your chains, because they thought proletariats are really unhappy being poor, and they are going to become atheists and going to unite on the basis of their economic condition. मगर इन लोगों को ये समझ में नहीं आया कि प्रोलेटारिएट्स तो है भाई डिवाउट रिलीजियस पीपल, जहाँ के भी हैं. प्रोलेटारिएट्स आर द बिगेस्ट कैरियर्स ऑफ दैट प्लेसेस कल्चर एंड रिलीजन, बिकॉज दे डोंट हैव द प्रिविलेज ऑफ प्लेइंग दिस बुलशिट ग्लोबल सिटीजन आइडियाज. तो अमेरिका में मार्क्सिज्म का परचेज और भी कम है, वहाँ के प्रोलेटारिएट्स ही तो ट्रम्प को वोट देते हैं. लेट मी टेल यू अ big stat. Okay, your mind will be blown with this stat, what I'm about to tell you. Just wait. Listen to this. People who vote for Trump versus people who don't, people who voted for Biden. Okay, check this out. This is an article by sort of an apologetic democratic intellectual, Democratic Party ka supporter, who is now thinking that yes, Trump is bad, but why aren't we able to convince them? उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्या लिखा है सुनो. Members of our class also segregate ourselves. He's talking about white liberals, rich people, okay? We segregate ourselves into a few booming metro areas: San Francisco, DC, Austin, and so on. Now listen to this stat. In 2020, Joe Biden won only 500 or so counties. But together, they are responsible for 71% of the American economy. Okay. Liberals are voting for, liberals एकजुट होकर वोट कर रहे हैं जिसके लिए उन लोगों का मेन वोटर बेस है 500 काउंटी में, मगर इतना पैसा दे दिया है, इतना सपोर्ट वहाँ से मिल रहा है, और सबको जाना भी पड़ रहा है वहाँ पे स्लम्स में रहने के लिए, जैसे कि हमारे यहाँ बेंगलुरु, मुंबई इज़ द मेन कल्चर हब्स एक्सेट्रा. तो वो 500 काउंटी के लोगों का नेटवर्थ ऐसा है कि वो लोग आर द 71% ऑफ द इकोनॉमी, सिर्फ 500 काउंटी में. अब सुनो, Trump won over 2,500 counties, responsible for only 29% of the American economy. Once we find our cliques, we don't get out much. In the book Social Class in the 21st Century, sociologist Mike Savage and his co-researchers found that the members of the highly educated class tend to be the most insular, most protected. पता ही नहीं है क्या हो रहा है पूरे बाकी दुनिया में. Measured by how often we have contact with those who have jobs unlike our own, which is why they don't understand actually how proletariats think. And which is why our proletariats are basically Marxist, because they are religiously Marxist. They are not thinking on it based on economics. तो वो रिलीजन बंद करो, उन लोगों को समझाना पड़ेगा कि अरे भाई फ्री चीज़ से तुम्हारा भला नहीं होगा. अल्टीमेटली तुम जो चीज़ खरीदते हो सबका तुमको टैक्स भी देना पड़ता है ना, तो तुम स्वाभिमान के साथ जो सैलरी मिल रहा है वो सैलरी लेके अपना खुद का सब चीज़ खुद खरीदोगे कि यूनियन को पैसा दोगे और इतना टैक्स दोगे सब चीज़ों में. जो चीज़ खरीद रहे हो सब कुछ में तो जीएसटी दे रहे हो, वो कौन सा काम आ रहा है तुम्हारा. Okay. If the proletariats are personal, if without street power, intellectual power is useless in Bharat. We have to empower VHP and Bajrang Dal and get them away from RSS control, strengthen VHP and Bajrang Dal as much as you can go extreme tribal. Yeah, but the problem is that when you are saying these things, there is an economic superiority involved here. Because if you really had the balls to join Bajrang Dal yourself, you would not have a fake profile on your YouTube, right? I'm not hating you for it. I know what constraints we have in our society. But I'm saying that if you are not even brave enough to have a YouTube channel with your own name and your own DP, how do you expect people to join Bajrang Dal and VHP and get beaten up or get killed or have 100 FIRs in their name? Then what you are basically saying is that गरीब लोगों को भेजो, हमको नहीं भेजना है. हम अपने बेटे को नहीं भेजेंगे, हम अपने मामा काका को नहीं भेजेंगे, हम खुद नहीं जाएंगे, हम यूट्यूब में डीपी नहीं देंगे, मगर बोलेंगे कि कोई ना किसी को जाना चाहिए वीएचपी में. ठीक है, दैट्स एन एब्सोल्यूट बैंडेड ऑफ अ बैंडेड आइडिया, एंड फॉर विच यू हैव टू स्पेंड एक्स्ट्रा मनी विच यू आर ऑलरेडी पेइंग एज टैक्सेस फॉर फकर्स इन द पुलिस. ओके, so I'm saying keep pushing for police reforms and promoting Yogi Adityanath kind of governance, and not another investment in Bajrang Dal and VHP, where you are basically saying this because you are rich enough to not have to join that just for money, because you are asking someone to join. No, you are asking basically poor people to do your fighting, to do your dirty work. I'm saying find a better solution. How do you propose the government defeats cartelization from corporates or unions? There are different ways to it. Unions का cartelization तो नहीं होगा, unions को पूरा बंद कर देना है, नहीं होगा unions. या फिर companies को बोल दो कि it's fine, or encourage in some rhetoric in some way that companies should not really look for unions, and if they absolutely don't allow unions, that should be absolutely celebrated. That's the way to do it. Who says I have not joined any of these organizations? Then why don't you have a DP and your original name? It's good if you have joined, and I hope you are alive, and I hope you don't spend your life in jail, but it's good. And I will never say you should not, but I will say that you should not promote this idea, because most people are not going to join it themselves, and most people are not going to sell their relatives. I know people who actively say that Hindus must become even as evil as terrorists to counter these things, but his own son studies in a big university in Maharashtra. Lol. That's the people I'm talking about. हाउ डू यू प्रपोज द गवर्नमेंट डिफीट्स कार्टेलाइजेशन. हाँ, तो कार्टेलाइजेशन डिफीट करने का ये उपाय है कि गवर्नमेंट को नोटिस करना चाहिए कि व्हाट आर द इंटरनेशनल स्टैंडर्ड्स ऑफ सैलरी फॉर दिस पर्टिकुलर जॉब. इससे कम इंडिया में थोड़ा बहुत होगा शायद, हमारा रुपी डॉलर के तौर पे कम है इसलिए, मगर कितना कम रह रहा है, और हर कंपनी में क्या सिर्फ 1-2 रुपये का डिफरेंस है? कोई भी आके नया सैलरी नहीं दे पा रहा है. इफ़ दैट इज़ द केस गोइंग ऑन, व्हाट इज़ गोइंग ऑन? Is it really because the industry can afford to pay? For example, कार्टेलाइजेशन अगर नहीं भी हो तो भी ए.आर. रहमान को अचानक 500 करोड़ रुपए नहीं मिलेगा कोई भी मूवी करने के लिए. ऐसा कोई फ्री मार्केट सोल्यूशन नहीं है कि ए.आर. रहमान को 500 करोड़ रुपए मिल जाए एक मूवी का बैकग्राउंड स्कोर करने के लिए. एक रीजनेबल अमाउंट ऑफ फीस में ही ए.आर. रहमान को सेटिस्फाइड रहना पड़ेगा, मगर वो कितना कम है, और अगर वो उतना ही कम है, वो बाकी दुनिया के कंपैरिजन में कितना कम है, और बाकी सभी एम्प्लॉयर्स मिलके क्या ये आर्टिफिशियली कम रख रहे हैं, ये ढूंढना है सरकार को. और ये ढूंढ के अगर निकला कि अच्छा ये लोग तो थोड़ा इन्वेस्टिगेशन शुरू होगा. ये इन्वेस्टिगेशन शुरू हुआ है, किसी को बताने का ज़रूरत भी नहीं है, मगर हिंट्स जब मिलता है इन्वेस्टिगेशन शुरू होना चाहिए, और फिर देखना होगा कि अच्छा ये प्रोड्यूसर ने इस प्रोड्यूसर के साथ बात किया है का, या फिर इनडायरेक्टली या फिर डायरेक्टली भी. Have they really met up and decided that we are going to pay Raman only 1,000 rupees for a film's background score? Then they see cartelization and then find the fuck out of these companies. Best lessons on freebies was the inscription we did today. Yes, I meant because Marxists tied up with rich corporations against proletariats because capitalism improved their lives. Yes. Then whom are the Marxists even fighting for? They are just fighting for their religion. और कुछ नहीं है. Or they think that, okay, proletariats are stupid fucks, but even if we do this for them, okay, they don't know they are in darkness. We know they are in darkness. But after all, if we do end up doing this, even without their help, we will make their lives better. वो instinct है baby. I have joined and I'm a member, however, until I'm fully financially free. But until then, in a lower organization level, I have had heated debates with BJP cucks and have been jailed after. Yes. And you will be jailed multiple times. You are basically going out of law and beating people up. So, jail to तुम्हारे भाग्य में है ही बार-बार. After trying to defend Hindu Dharma from Congis, which is why I won't appear fully online until I'm secure, then the gloves are off. Okay, I understand. Yeah, that makes a sense. But if you are doing that, okay. You are basically saying you are okay with going to jail. So, savior complex. Yes. Savior complex is the essence of any Abrahamic thought.
The bosses are no longer the enemy, they're an opportunity. Because the working class is irrelevant. He said the energy is somewhere else. He said it's in the racial minorities, the sexual minorities, the feminists, the outsiders. That's who he said have the energy for a Marxist revolution in the West, not the working class.
Not the working
class. And so Marxism was able to evolve to abandon
because the working class votes for Trump.
Working class. And so what did they do? Well, all they had studied for 30 years was what they called the culture industry. An industry that commodifies and packages culture and sells it back to people. So supposedly stripped of what it actually is, empty, abstract now. And so what, of course, did they do? They seized the means of production of the culture industry, because that's what they do. And so they started to transform the culture industry to sell racial, sexual, gender, sexuality-based agitprop, as though that were genuine culture. And so we get concepts like
agitprop, agitation prop. सिर्फ प्रोटेस्ट करते फिरो, बैनर बनाओ और होर्डिंग बनाओ, पोस्टर बनाओ, फेस्टून बनाओ.
Cultural appropriation. We get concepts like cultural relevance, cultural this, cultural that, cultural everything, and it's all provided in pastiche. It's all provided as a mockery of what's really going on. And this evolved in America's highly racialized context, and we ended up with woke, a form of identity-based Marxism, a constellation of Marxist species that all work with the same operating premise but locate themselves in different, and I'll use the German term here for this, folk. LGBTQ is a folk. And they get folkish identity there and become activists. The black community is a folk. How do I know? That's what W.E.B. Du Bois said it would be when he laid down the foundations that became critical race theory later. They think of themselves as nations. Don't they all have flags? Don't they put them on your buildings like colleges?
And this is why I say wokeism has been exported from India. Because if you read India, Bharat, Pakistan, you will see all this has been said in exactly this way for the Muslim community by Muslim intellectuals who are phenomenally articulate, insanely great in English. People like Syed Amir Ali. People like that Nawab of Bangladesh. What some Nawab uska naam tha, kya tha? Nawab Salimullah. Okay, Nawab Salimullah, Syed Amir Ali, Syed Ahmed Khan. These are the people who came up with these ideas and which were propagated and given a voice by Marxist intellectuals, because they realized that, okay, aren't they kind of right? Muslims are really sad and oppressed under the colonized rule, and then Hindus are going to rule. Inka kya hoga bichare minorities? So, इनके लिए तो ये they have to be treated as a folk. They have to be treated as a nation. इसलिए they are a people. They are not a minority. They are not part of the citizenry. They are a people. A people meaning a separate population. Two nation theory का birth यहीं से होता है. Which is why that people has a separate flag. Okay.
Colonizers, don't they hang them in your streets? They think of themselves as occupying nations, but they see themselves as bound together, just like the various colonized nations around the world, in seeking liberation from Western civilization. And so we end up with Western Marxism taking many forms, but with one overarching approach. And the approach that they use, I started off by saying, is Maoist, not merely Marxist. Now you know the theory is Marx. It's just evolved into different species to attack the West at its weakest points, through our tolerance, through our acceptance, through our openness, through our generosity, through our best traits, actually. The things that we should be proud of being, the things that we are proud of being. But Mao Zedong knew how to use identity politics.
Yes, cultural revolution. Yeah, Rutvik, I missed it because I वो top comments वाला घपला था. Yes, now I can see your comment. So you said India has an invisible form of unionization, auto drivers, electricians, caste, punch societies which create real estate, milk coops, yes, milk cooperatives, sugarcane politics. Yes, BJP isn't able to break this. Nor do they, I think, want to break this. वो नेक्स्ट जनरेशन का फ्री मार्केट वाला लोग आएंगे तब होगा, और वो भी शायद तब भी शायद नहीं होगा, क्योंकि यूनियन बाजी का सबसे बड़ा डर यही होगा हमेशा कि अरे भाई हम यूनियन नहीं करेंगे तब तो कंपनी हमको 4 रुपये पर आवर दे के काम करवाएगा. तो इसके लिए बहुत पर्कुलेशन ऑफ थॉमस सोवेल काइंड ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स ज़रूरी है, जिससे कि लोगों को पता चले कि अरे यूनियनाइजेशन इज़ नॉट द गोल. यूनियनाइजेशन, यूनियनबाजी हर पार्टी का प्रॉब्लम होता है, नॉट बिकॉज द पार्टी इज़ बैड, बिकॉज द सोल्यूशन इटसेल्फ इज़ बैड इवन इन थ्योरी. Otherwise, it's like saying that real communism has never been tried. That's the same problem with unions. Real unionism has never been tried. हर जगह यूनियनबाजी फेल कर रहा है. Socialism is a natural consequence in our social preferences. Even BJP is not immune to it. Yes.
I don't know how you study in Europe, but in America we have very red-washed education, as we might say. The communists have stripped out all
यही तो प्रॉब्लम हमारा है. तो और ये लोग सोचते हैं कि हिंदूज इनका शत्रु है.
education about communism entirely. You don't learn about it in America at all. So we don't learn anything about Mao. And maybe you don't know this, but I tell this to American audiences and they're shocked. Mao used identity politics. He created 10 identities in China. 5, he labeled red for communist. 5, he labeled black for fascist. And he categorized people into these identity categories. What they are doesn't really matter. Of course, they were communists. They were things like landlord and rich farmer and things like this. Right-winger is a bad category in and of itself, by the way. Conservative, all of them, bad. Bad influences, that's another one. You could be a bad influence for just thinking the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing at any time, or because the government decides it doesn't like you. These are the bad categories. And if you have a bad category, very importantly, your children have a bad category by default. So they create a social pressure for your children to identify as revolutionaries, at which point they get a red identity, a communist identity, a good identity. And they get rewarded for it. And the youth led the revolution in China because Mao did this, identity politics through the children in the schools. This should feel very uncomfortable to you. Because here we have, at least in the United States, we tell our children being white is bad. Being white is oppressive. You automatically hurt people of other races by your very existence.
And which is why white liberals are the ones who are embracing LGBTQ mostly in the largest numbers, because उनको प्रमाण करना है कि हम तो भाई ऑप्रेसर क्लास से नहीं है, हम भी थोड़ा विक्टिम है, चलो अब मैं हिजरा बन जाता हूँ.
But by the way, if you become queer, we'll celebrate you. And you can create a radical army of people who identify as gender minorities and sexual minorities at 7 years old. You can lead them into paths of puberty blockers and transition, medical transition, which of course Big Pharma profits off of. At 7 years old, behind their parents' back. There's a reason for this. It's the same program that Mao Zedong used to radicalize the youth in China. The only thing different is the identity categories have shifted. It's Maoist cultural revolution with American characteristics, and it's being exported to Europe. And just like how critical race theory has come to Europe, even though it doesn't make sense, it will come to Europe, whether it makes sense or not, and you will have a cultural revolution here too. You guys even had a kind of offshoot one in 2020. George Floyd dies in Minnesota, which has nothing to do with you. And you guys have statues coming down in Europe. Total nonsense. It doesn't matter though. The point is...
And all this is supported by the ESG movement, and people think I'm a conspiracy theorist. Someone said I'm a conspiracy theorist for pointing out that, Are bhai, Jio is teaming up with ESG. Modi is teaming up with World Economics Forum. All this is going to translate into ESG and casteism, further casteism-based politics, and they're going to find more victim groups to involve. Now, ESG in India probably will say that you have to have 50 Muslims in your board, in your company. तब क्या करोगे? तब मुझको conspiracy theories बोलोगे या बोलोगे कि नहीं विवेक रामास्वामी पढ़ के क्या होगा? All this is coming to you very soon.
Is to destroy Western civilization from within using Maoist techniques. One last point about Mao to kind of drive that point home. Mao said in 1942 that his formula to transform China was called unity, criticism, unity. First, you try to create the desire for unity. Then you criticize people for not living up to that. Then you bring them into unity under a new standard. Does that feel like what you're being put through? But the words are different. We use words like inclusion and belonging.
और वो ESG के वजह से ही इंडियन क्रिकेट टीम यहाँ वहाँ वो नील डाउन करते फिरता है नेशनल एंथम के वक्त. अजीब बात है. हमने ब्लैक लोगों को मारा जाके. ICC और BCCI में इतना इन्वेस्टमेंट है ESG का, वो समझना पड़ेगा लोगों को, भारतीयों को.
Belonging. We'll have a place where everybody feels like they belong. We just want to have an inclusive space. But unfortunately, you have racist ideas, and we have to criticize you for those. You need to criticize yourself for those. You need to go study 学习 in Mandarin, exactly like Mao said. And then we can bring you into unity under a new standard, which Mao called socialist discipline, which we in the West would not buy. We call it in the West inclusion. And so we have this new program, and within inclusion we have, or above inclusion actually, we have sustainability. We have a sustainable and inclusive future. I see the Agenda 2030 here with an X over it. The sustainable and inclusive future is the new socialist standard, that we will have freedom under socialist discipline. And Mao said the way that that will work is through what he called democratic centralism. We call that stakeholder capitalism.
Stakeholder capitalism is what ESG is doing and the World Economic Forum is doing, and my power is again gone. Let's see if it stays on until this video ends, hopefully.
And my shot at the World Economic Forum is taken because it's one of the things coordinating this.
Yes.
My shot at the United Nations is taken because it's one of the things that's coordinating this. So woke is Marxism. It's advancing through Maoist cultural revolution. It's using Americanized identity categories, and while some of those will not work in Europe, I guarantee you the colonial aspect will. They will find your weakness, they will adapt the theory to fit, because it's like a virus that will evolve to its host. And Europe is at great risk. Now, the last thing I'll mention is this risk is twofold. When you endure Marxist provocation, Marxist strategy is always of the same type. It's called middle-level violence. They don't come at you with full-blown Bolshevik assault very often. It's middle-level violence. They provoke, which means if you give in and you do like Jean-Paul Sartre said in his foreword to The Wretched of the Earth by Franz Fanon, the post-colonial book, he said, the violence is coming. So Europe's best bet is to give it away so that they don't kill you. They'll murder you and take it, or maybe you can give it away, give your culture away, give your countries away, and they'll let you live.
This is what we think of our Pattharbaz as well. Okay, chalo karne do. And my power might go off, the live stream might end anytime randomly, okay? Because the power is not back yet. My inverter is working.
They're coming for you. And this is what Europe needs to learn. That's what he says in the foreword of Wretched of the Earth. You can read it for yourself, probably in the original French that I can't read. And I think that's the path Europe has followed. So you can give away. That's one side, because they provoke at the middle. Or you can react and overreact, which sadly Europe has had a rough history in the last century with overreactions. And if you overreact, what will they do? They will weaponize your overreaction for a century, forever, and gain moral authority so that you end up having to give it away later anyway. So you have to stand firm in your principles, but you have to do so cleverly. You have to do so understanding that you're being provoked, which means you don't react as the provocateur wants you to react. You have to outsmart them, which is not possible unless you know the diagnosis of your problem.
Yes.
It's a Polish proverb, never attempt to cure what you don't understand. Woke is Marxism, evolved to attack the West. If you don't understand that, you will not act correctly. You will not...
See, again, he's not fully correct, because wokeism is also designed to attack Hinduism as well, and Indian culture. Sab kuch.
Cure it, and it will conquer your countries. It will conquer all of Europe, and we will have a very, very long, sustainable, and inclusive future with absolutely no freedom. Because the goal is to make us into what they call global citizens. Have you heard this term? This term is nonsense. There's no global sovereign, so there is no global citizenship. There's no relationship because there's no ruler, and we don't want a ruler of the globe. It's a nonsense term. But they tell you, if you actually read their literature, what is a global citizen? It's somebody, I kid you not, I make no joke. They say this themselves. It's somebody who supports the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations Agenda 2030. That's a global citizen. And they say, what are the rights of a global citizen? This is in a book about global citizenship education published 2 years ago. What are the rights of a global citizen? And the answer, one paragraph later, is we're not that interested in rights with global citizenship. It's more about global responsibilities. In other words, slavery. This is a pivotal moment in the history of the Western world. The model that they are pushing us toward, using the means and mechanisms of that place, is the model we see in China. If you want to know what your future looks like if we don't stop the woke, look at China. Look at the social credit system. Look at the oppression. Look at people disappearing for having the wrong opinions. One of their greatest billionaires, Jack Ma, said the wrong thing about the government and disappeared. A billionaire.
He disappeared, but he's back now.
If you want to know what the future of Europe and America and the Five Eyes or whatever the countries, it's China. That's the model. So we have to fight back against woke, but to fight back against woke, we have to understand it, and I will close by restating my thesis. Woke as Marxism evolved to take on the West, and it's been very successful so far because we haven't known our enemy, we cannot name our enemy, and I've come here to name our enemy. So thank you for your time and attention and letting me do that.